I think it's terrifying. I mean, this seems potentially like one of the biggest stories of my lifetime. And I don't care if it's about UFOs or whatever you call it. Something that we don't understand is getting very close to our military aircraft.
The technologies related to energy generation should come out first.
This hybrid aerospace underwater craft is able to basically generate an electromagnetic field.
It is President Trump's belief that the United States must remain as dominant in space as we are on land and sea and the air. And your charge is to see to that mission with the United States Space Force.
There were 3 people on my team assassinated, and I was almost killed.
With a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
It's a matter of national security.
But apparently, just recovered are off-world vehicles not made on this Earth.
The president will respond to the subject the way they want them to. There's a black box with all the technologies that would give us a civilization that's sustainable, peaceful, etc., and it's been around for decades.
Everybody's asking the biggest question in the world. Are we alone?
Look, it's just stalled out there.
The narrative that's being launched, which is a false narrative, is that we're not alone and that those civilizations are a threat. The problem is that the public has to be informed and involved.
It could be a brief statement saying, hallelujah, I'm finally vindicated.
I'm not completely convinced they're going to let this stay like it is.
But the people who are surrounding that level of our politicians and government are not told. Like the movie Independence Day, where Will say, let's go kick alien butt.
Good evening and welcome to Dark Hour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser, and tonight I have a new friend coming by. I was on his show last week. Well, no, actually it was this week. It was Tuesday night, and I definitely implore you guys to check that out. He did a fantastic job as a host, and the interview was exceptional, given the energy that this individual brings. Folks, I have Mogollon Monster. I got it right. Mogollon. I got it right. I see the phonetic spelling in my head, and that's how I'm remembering this, because up to this point, I have fucked it up the entire time that I've tried to say it. So, with that being said, we're going to have a fantastic time tonight, guys. We have a few things planned in the way of knowing the Mogollon Monster and his channel, WTF, which is Why the Fascination. Very, very cool channel, and I definitely would encourage you guys to go and check that out as well. Now, that being said, I'm not going to spend too much time here talking your ear off. We'll save that for the show, and Mogollon will have plenty to say. So without further ado, let's jump right into this, guys. Please welcome Mogollon Monster.
Michael, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a hell of an intro. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So some of those of you who are kind of confused out there, what the initial clip is that I'm playing is the Countdown to Explosion. Countdown to Disclosure by ThirdPhaseOfMoon. This documentary will be released on February 16th, and I have had the opportunity and pleasure of being able to play that and promote it on the show. Obviously, you know, my affiliation with Third Phase and what we do, and this is going to be a great great documentary. But just to clarify, because I have seen some people saying, "What's going on? Is this a new opening?" But some of you guys recognize it. All right, so let's get into this, Mogollon. I'm really excited to have you here tonight. So I'd like to start at the beginning for you. Okay, this is sort of a host-to-host setting here, and this is going to be kind of interesting to get to know more about where you came from and how you got to where you are now. So, where did it start for you? Any sort of interest in the paranormal, cryptids, ufology, anything along those lines? Was there any defining moment in life, be it earlier on or later on, that really propelled you into this field of interest?
The strong field didn't, the interest in this field didn't come until just a couple of years ago. But when I was a kid, I had some weird things happen. I used to finish my dad's sentences, and it would kind of piss him off. Because I guess I was right, but as a kid, I didn't know this. I didn't even think about this until recently, where I'd go back and be like, huh. Because a lot of the time in my life, I'd have these weird instances where, I think I mentioned to you, I'd be hanging out with someone and a thought would pop into my head and they would say it. And I'd always be like, what made you say that? I was just thinking that. Well, I don't ask that question anymore. I'm just like, huh. I realize now I've picked up thoughts. So I've dealt with that for a long time. I realized what it was. But when I was 13, I had an outer body experience. I was camping along the Delaware River with my dad, my two sisters, and my sister's boyfriend. And my dad and my little sister, we decided to go on a hike up this mountain. And on top of the mountain, there's a lake. So there's a stream that comes off of that lake and comes down the mountain. And we get about, halfway up the mountain. And at one point, this stream is right next to the trail. And there's this big rock and the water's flowing over it. And it looks like kind of like a waterfall. To me, I'm 13. It looked like a water slide. So I hopped on this big rock and slid down it, and it was more of a fall. But I landed in a puddle of water with my knees in my chest, and just in that squatted position. I hit hard, and that's where my body stopped. But it's like my soul, my spirit, kind of tumbled out of me. And for 2 seconds, I was like 10 feet away from myself, looking at myself. I was on my hands and knees looking at myself in a squatted position. That kind of freaked me out. And it slowly came back, like I came back to my body, and everything was in slow motion at that moment. Like I saw my dad running towards me. And that was in slow motion. And then all of a sudden everything came back and was in real time. And that's when you realize you screwed up.
Well, let me ask you this. What did it feel like being out of your body? Was there a shock associated with the disassociation from physicality? Were you able to interpret all that? Or was it more a natural?
Not at the moment. No, it wasn't. It was because it was a thud. Like I said, my body stopped suddenly and just kind of rolled out. It was for 2 seconds. So there wasn't a lot of time to even register what was going on at the moment. But I know it happened.
Oh, yeah.
And, I came back to myself and ended up with, broken ankle and, I was hurt. But that's kind of really my first paranormal experience.
Super personal too. A lot of times people see something outside of themselves and then come to conclusions that, something like this exists. But your experience is a little bit more direct, I should say the least, having this personal experience. That's just incredible, man, that's your introduction.
Yeah. So, I've always, growing up in New Jersey, we had the Jersey Devil. So that was always would come up in newspaper articles, throughout my childhood. So We lived near the Pine Barrens. I had the same type of woods behind my house and all over the place. That's where I lived, was the woods and the beach. And, so we had that. And you heard about Bigfoot. You thought there was one somewhere in California or wherever, but there was only one. Ghosts, I never had any experiences with when I was a child. It wasn't until 1993. Actually, in 1992, we found out my mother had cancer. And August of 93, we got the call that she was not doing good. My sister called us and said, "Hey, mommy's not good." She was in the hospital. So we drove out there, my younger sister and I, and we went to the hospital to see her, and she wasn't responsive, but I knew she could hear us. I just knew. So we gave her permission to go home, let go, and said our goodbyes and I love yous. And, we left. And the next night, my younger sister, stayed the night with her at the hospital. It was the first time anybody had spent the night. And like at 5:20 in the morning, my sister got up to go get coffee. And in between the time that she left the room and came back, my mom passed.
Oh, wow.
So, and I feel that my mom knew she left the room. So, excuse me.
Take your time.
We get the call. I was at my other sister's house, and my sister tells us mom passed, and it was like, thank God, there's no more suffering. And it's funny because my sister was involved with the church. It's the Midwest. It was in Peoria, Illinois. That's where this took place. And when someone passes, the congregation shows up with food. It's just the way it is. And this, I can't stand Miracle Whip. I like mayonnaise, Hellman's or Best or whatever. But everything out there was made with Miracle Whip. I couldn't eat that stuff. So that night, I know it sounds stupid, but that night, I said to my sister, I said, "Pam, let's go get some dinner. We'll go to a restaurant and, just chill and decompress." So as we're heading out, we run into this storm in the distance. You can see it coming in. Now I have to stop there and backtrack. Growing up with my mother on the Jersey Shore, we loved when it would rain, like good storms, because back then the power would go out all the time. So we'd sit around in the dark with candles and play Monopoly or whatever. It was just a cool time, it was fun. So we always loved lightning storms and thunder and stuff. So we're heading out. We see this storm coming in, and it's just intense. It's strobe lightning. I'd never seen anything like this in my life. We looked at each other as we're heading into this, and we just were like, this is mommy. This is mommy. So we go have dinner, and after dinner, we decide we're going to go to this local bar and grab a drink. And the storm's still raging, and we go to the bar. We walk in, grab a seat at the bar. Now, some bars in the Midwest, and even around, and it's just not the Midwest, it's a lot of different places, they have this thing called Shake a Day, or whatever you want to call it. This is why I mentioned, you know how to play Yahtzee? Okay. Well, you would walk in at this bar, you give them a quarter, and you get a cup with 5 dice in it, like Yahtzee. And you would roll, and you could win stuff. A free roll, 6-pack, a drink, money. So I give the bartender my quarter, and I get the cup, and I roll the dice, and I win a 6-pack. I'm like, right on. So I give it to my sister. She gives the quarter. She rolls, and she gets a free roll. She rolls again. She gets a free roll. She rolls again. she wins a 6-pack. Now I look at the bartender, and the bartenders get this funny look on their face. And I said, how often does that happen? It doesn't. I turned to my sister. I said, hey, Pammy, listen to the song on the jukebox. It's AC/DC. Have a drink on me.
Ah.
Thanks, Mom.
Oh, that's so cool. I mean, what are your thoughts on us sort of quieting the mind enough to pick up on some of these more subtle hints? And do you think that we could be receiving some of these so-called messages, if you will, from spirit more often than we're aware?
Absolutely. You just have to pay attention. You have to be willing to pay attention and open yourself up to it. See those little serendipitous things, pay attention. There's little things and that you might recognize, but don't realize what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not just, and don't go into it thinking everything is a sign, but you'll get signs if you pay attention.
Now, speaking of signs, I understand that you enjoy numerology quite a bit. Can you explain some of your interest in that and perhaps what you've learned as you've researched it and experienced it yourself?
You know what? I haven't researched it. It's just something I've always done. As when I see numbers, I add them together. For some reason, since I was young, I would see numbers and I would just add them together, come out with an end result. And that's basically what numerology does. But each end result means something different. It's just, I pay attention because I get a lot of signs in numerology, 111, 222, it shows, I'll see the same numbers on the clock all the time. It happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It might be their birthday. But a lot of people see 1111 all the time. So it's just a fascination, but it's not, I never really researched it. I want to, there's a continuation to that story, by the way.
Yeah.
So, that happens, and that was in 93, to have a drink on me. And 2010, I'm here in Arizona now, and I'm at this bar. I was going in there to look at their computer system. They had a karaoke system, and I wanted to check it out and see what they had and see if I could get it up and running. Just to see, maybe we could do karaoke there with what they had.
Mm-hmm.
So I pull it out, and it's just me, the bartender, and the cook that are in the place. I pull it out, and there's some music playing, and I went into the kitchen and changed the station. I'd never touched their satellite radio before, but I found a country station and just switched it and went back to what I was doing. And I noticed that the music, for some reason, you'd hear it, and then it would just fade away. It would get really low, then it would get loud again. And I've thought about it later on. I'm guessing that maybe the computer and the karaoke and the house system were going through maybe the same amplifier, and it was overheating or something. I don't know. So that's what it was doing. The music would get loud or get soft, and so I wasn't paying attention to it. So I start talking to the cook, and he's all tatted out. He's got tats, and I have a lightning bolt down on my ankle, and I explained to him why I have it. I said, it was in honor of my mom because, we dug lightning storms. So I proceed to tell him the story I just told you. And he's like, oh man. And he gets goosebumps, and he's like, wow. He's like, I got to go though. And he leaves. So now it's just me and the bartender. So I go outside to have a cigarette, and it's kind of weird because it happened to be June 27th, 2010. And that June 27th was my parents' original anniversary.
Huh.
And I go outside to have a cigarette. Now, on anniversaries or whenever I just want to say hi to my mom, I do it outside and I talk out loud. So I go outside and I say, happy anniversary, Mom. Love you, miss you, whatever. And all of a sudden I get this this feeling of doubt. And I said out loud, I hope everything I've been believing in all these years isn't bullshit. And I open the door, I go back inside. I go over and grab my pint glass I was drinking back then. And I bring the pint glass to the bar, and the bartender says, "Would you like another one?" I said, "Sure." And I put the glass down. As soon as it hit the bar, the music got real loud. I didn't notice it was down, but the music got real loud. And behind the bar was a shelf, a glass shelf with 3 bottles of Patron. Patron has corks. I don't know why they put a cork in a, tequila bottle, but whatever. But one of those corks pops, just hits the ceiling.
Huh.
Yeah, as soon as that glass hits the bar, the music got loud, the cork flies out of the Patron bottle, and the bartender turns white. She's like, she turns white, she looks around, she's all like, "What the hell's going on?" And I knew what was happening, and I just started laughing. And I said, "I guess my mom doesn't want me to have another drink." And I had to explain to her, but I said to the woman, I said, "Listen to the song on the jukebox that's playing on satellite radio. The song is called So Do You Believe Me Now?"
The synchronicity is just overwhelming. And I love to hear things like this because you are obviously paying attention. And for those who do pay attention, spirit can sometimes be very entertaining or even humorous. Believe me, that's incredible. So you've been getting these. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just had to cough.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, so you've been seeing these sort of signs for quite some time now. Is it still something that you're aware of today? Are things still, how do I want to put this? Is spirit still?
Not really. No,
Okay.
I haven't seen any presence. Well, let me. Yes, I have to backtrack. 3 years ago. 3 years ago, about 3.5 years ago, I stumbled upon Sasquatch Chronicles and started listening to all these different, firsthand accounts and got hooked.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear all these different things, of things they do, like knocking on, wood knocks and stuff. So that was somewhere in the back of my mind when this happened. I'm trying to think of it. December 7th, 2017, excuse me. Go to work, and we got Chinese food for lunch. And with the Chinese food, you get a fortune cookie. So I read the fortune, put it in my pocket, go through the day. I get home, and I forgot it was my nephew's birthday. I just finished work and I just want to relax. And we're about to have guests. So I'm like, oh, crap, I forgot. Yes. So I walk into the house from the carport, and my nephew is standing at the sink doing dishes. And he's got his Christian music playing. He's Christian. And I wasn't paying attention to the song, didn't care, just walked by. I went out through the sliding glass doors, had a cigarette, come back inside after the cigarette, walk back through the kitchen, hear the music again, don't pay attention. I turn into the hallway, and just as I'm getting it, like to the middle of the hallway, all of a sudden I do hear a lyric. And at the same time, I hear a voice in my head say, "Turn around." I said, "Okay." And I immediately just spun around, and I knew why I was turning around. The lyric I heard was, "You could make a wish or you could knock on wood." So that's all I heard. And I spun around when I heard "turn around." I go back in and I said, "Dude, is that on your playlist?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Do me a favor, start it over." So he restarts the song, and I start listening and listening. And I'm like, is that Reba McEntire? He's like, yeah, she did a song with this Christian artist, and this is it. So I listened to it, and I pulled up the lyrics on my phone, and the song's over, and I'm reading the lyrics, but I still have the melody, the song in my head. But I can hear my ex-wife singing it. Like my ex-wife has an amazing voice. So as I'm reading the lyrics, I'm like, shit, my ex-wife, my ex-wife could sing this song. I want to hear her sing this song. So I pick up my phone. Well, my phone's sitting on the table, and I'm leaning over it. I send a text to my ex. I say, hey, listen, learn this song. I'd like to hear you sing this song. And thanks, gave her the name of the song. And as soon as I hit send, I started crying. I just got this feeling, and I started crying. And I stood up like, what the hell? Trying to choke it back. I'm like, what the hell was that? So my sister's sitting on the couch in the living room to my right, and she's like, oh, what song was that? The name of the song was Back to God. And by the time I couldn't talk without crying. So it was weird. So by the time I got the word God out, when I told her what the name of it was, I was bawling. And I was like, excuse me. And I walked out. I went back outside and was like trying to compose myself. And I was like, what the hell was that? Like, why am I feeling this way? And I'm standing on the patio, and all of a sudden I get this feeling, and it's coming from like my left. And it felt like it was coming from above, because I just happened to look to the sky, and all of a sudden I got this overwhelming feeling of, it was like it was hitting me in waves. And it was truth, 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 truth. And I'm like, what the hell? All I felt was truth, truth, truth hitting me. And the overwhelming feeling that something was being revealed. And it kind of like freaked me out, because I knew what it was. I knew who it was. It was divine. There was no doubt about it. It was God. And I was like, my first thought is, I don't want to go to church. Like, I'm thinking, I'm getting this revelation. I said, I don't want to have to go to church. And then I was like, you're an idiot. Why would you even think that? You don't go to church now, but it was so, because I knew it was God, and this was going to be something, amazing. And I'm still scratching my head about it. But I got this weird, this something's being revealed. And I was like, what do I do with this? And my sister comes out, and she sees I'm reacting funny. And I said, Kim, those stories I tell where the paranormal shit happens? She's like, yeah. I said, well, one of those stories is happening right now. and I recognized it as it was happening, what was happening, and that I'd be telling this story again one day. And she's like, well, God works in mysterious ways. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to hear that right now, because I wasn't ready to accept that it was God at that moment. It just seemed too, and I don't know, too intense. So I compose myself. I finally go back inside, and I'm a little freaked out. I finally make it to my bedroom, where my initial journey was to get from the kitchen to the bedroom, but got turned around. So I make it to the bedroom, and I'm emptying out my pockets, and I get to the bottom of my pocket, and I feel this piece of paper. Now I know what it is. It's the fortune from lunch. And I'm holding it in my pocket, and I take it out, and I don't look at it. But I remember one word from that, the last word from that fortune was truce. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, huh. I immediately go back into the kitchen where my sister was. I said, Kim, you saw what just happened. You just saw the shit I just went through this. I don't know what's going on. I said, but I just found this in my pocket and I'm going to read it. And I opened it. It said, if you are patient and pleasant, you will see more truths. It was just weird, dude.
I mean, you have these string of experiences that are connected, and you know what the connection is. That's in itself very significant, I think, when experiencing things like this. I can kind of, commiserate's not the word, but I can identify with what you just shared in terms of the emotion and everything that came and overtook you in a certain way. Now, I'll share this very quick story. I might have mentioned it one time in another show, but I don't recall. So let's see. It was 3 years ago. Excuse me. I think it was 3 years ago. I was with my ex and our kids, and we were, she lives on a main road in this town. So we're sitting there in the living room, and I think it was around Memorial Day. They were having a parade outside. Now, the interesting thing was that they had a whole crowd of people that was following, along with people dressed in military garb and so forth. And they were stopping at each of these old cemeteries that line the main street and doing the salute and everything and going through the whole motion. Now, she says to me, well, let's take the kids out and we'll get to see them come by and watch them run through. And I said, yeah, that's great. Great idea. So we get outside and there are, let's see. Let's say that, okay, there are two graveyards. There's more that are further down, but I started seeing them as I came up closer. The first graveyard is quite some distance away. Obviously I could walk there within a few minutes, but it was quite some distance away, and everybody's there and they're crowding around and they're going through whatever they're going through, and the guns blast. And as this happens, I'm looking over and I start seeing all these other images. They're very translucent. It's kind of like a cross between what you're seeing in your mind's eye overlaid on your physical reality. And when you're seeing this, you understand that that's what it is. It's not something you can go and shake hands with or what have you, but it's there nonetheless. And as I'm looking at this, I start feeling it. And it was a heavy, sort of morose, but accepting energy, maybe was surrounding what had happened with them, what they were involved in terms of conflict and so forth. But they were there. There's a lot of honor and respect that was in this energy. And as soon as I thought this, my ex turns over to me. She goes, do you see them? And as soon as she said that, it was like the confirmation, and it was real. And as soon as that happened, I got this wave of energy that hit me right in the chest, and I just started bawling. And I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk. I couldn't explain what was happening. I was just bawling. And as they started walking up, they walked past us and they went up to the cemetery that was closer to the house. And as they walked in there, like, I'm still fighting this feeling. I'm pushing it back because I'm in the crowd with a whole bunch of people. I got my kids here, people walking around watching me cry over, they don't know what it is because I'm an absolute mess. But the feeling kept coming in waves, and it was stronger and stronger each time, to the point where I couldn't hold it together. I had to leave. I literally had to leave, because as soon as I walked off and went back towards the house, it was like stepping out of a different field of energy. And it was like, oh, we're done. Oh, Jesus, what? And it wasn't mine though. You know what I mean? But I could feel it. So I can identify with that feeling again that you had in that experience, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, because I couldn't talk. I couldn't talk without crying. It was weird. It was such a heavy, like, but it was, the whole experience was in the end was cool as hell,
well, you're happy you have those experiences and that you can live through them and talk about them and hopefully interpret what they mean later on. This is so fascinating, but I want to talk a little bit about your name. Why Mogollon Monster? I mean, we know that you're in Arizona, and we know that the Mogollon Monster is from the Mogollon Rim area. But tell us a little bit about why you decided to pick Mogollon Monster for your name.
Well, like I said earlier, I got into Sasquatch Chronicles, watching and all those stories, and got into Bigfoot. And one day I stumbled upon a live chat. I didn't even know there were live shows. So I stumbled upon a live chat, and in order to get in there, you need to make up a channel. So I didn't really want to give my name at the time, like didn't want to put my name out there. So I was like, okay, I'm in Arizona, into Bigfoot, Mogollon Monster.
I like that.
And it stuck, and it's classic. It's because nobody can pronounce it. Everybody has trouble with it. So it's just, it makes me laugh every time somebody stumbles all over it.
Mogollon, Mogollon,
Mongolian.
Mongolian. I was saying Mongolian for a while there. That was fun.
So yeah, it's fun. You know,
out of all the cryptids that you're interested in, do you find that Bigfoot or the Mogollon Monster is at the top of the tier, or is it just, again, something that you thought was really interesting and wanted to take over that energy?
It was, as far as cryptids go, that's probably really the only cryptid I'm really into. You know, you hear all these other stories, you know, Dogman or Skinwalkers, or this is what I don't want to see any of those. I'll take the chance of, you know, seeing a Bigfoot. I'm willing to do that. It's just, but I'm just fascinated with, you know, all these stories I've heard. You know, if I've heard 3,000 stories, you know, I've heard one, you know, but everybody can't be lying. So
you're absolutely right about that. Now, you know, your area is rife with many different types of cryptids. Of course, we've mentioned the Mogollon Monster, which is a Yeti or Bigfoot-like type creature. You have skinwalkers, you have thunderbirds, you have enormous alien cats, which I believe the alien is used in respect that they're not indigenous to their environment and they're sort of out of place, but you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. You have lizard man, you have chupacabra. Why do you think there's so much activity in Arizona? I mean, yes, we're finding some of these cryptids in other places in the United States, just to pick a location, but there's just this overwhelming presence in a handful of these, and I think Arizona is one of them. Why do you think so?
I think it's the diverse landscape, because you can go from the desert to the forest, you know, just an elevation change. I don't know. I think like the chupacabra originated, you know, south of the border, that moved up. You know, we are a border state. I don't know. I understand, like, skinwalkers, you know, being a Native American legend or cryptid. And I've heard some other cryptids, well, not so much cryptids, but giant spiders getting dug up at construction sites up, you know, not far from the res or on the res. Yeah. Like,
how big?
Like big, like Volkswagen big.
Oh,
like prehistoric big. Yeah. I've heard two stories, same person. One was like a black widow, one was like a tarantula, and they ended up getting killed on site at the time. But yeah, it was like they dug them up. They were buried underground and somehow got dug up. I don't know. I don't know if there's pictures out there, but yeah, there's some weird stories out there.
No, the idea is definitely cool, and I think that finding a spider like that, or an enormous octopus in the sea, or something along those lines, excuse me, those could exist in ways that, you know, are natural to what we understand and what we're familiar with in respect to evolution and so forth. To me, those aren't as surprising as some of the more preternatural cryptids that we are seeing, but I still find absolute fascination in these gigantic animals and other beings that people are reporting, because they may be left over from some sort of Jurassic or Triassic period, and just has survived, possibly underneath the Earth's crust somehow. That's fascinating to me. What about portals, though? You guys have a lot in the way of natural portals going on. Do you think that plays into it at all?
You know what? I haven't really done any investigations on any of that stuff. I know they call them vortexes here. In Sedona, there's different vortexes. You can go and sit by a tree and supposed to feel a different energy or something. They do vortex tours. Out between here and Sedona, out in the outback, there's it's called Bradshaw Ranch. And that is supposed to have, it's government owned, but originally that was like sort of like Skinwalker Ranch. Mm-hmm. Bigfoot encounters, aliens, UFOs, portals.
Man, you know, to live on something like that, like a ranch that has that sort of activity. And
Well, I was friends with two of the grandsons for a while that did live on the ranch. They had some weird stories.
yeah, you can't even go to sleep at night knowing that you're just going to get a full night's sleep without something interrupting you.
Yeah.
If that's the case, you know, that's crazy. Well, I mean, you know, the cryptids are really interesting for so many reasons. And I think that, you know, possibly why some of these are more clustered, I should say, in certain areas has to, like you're saying, it must have to do with the environment, some of the terrain, some of the things that are available to them, because I do believe that there is a biological aspect in some of these cryptids, because they are definitely existing within their environment. They're feeding off of it, or they're habitating there. We can see those things, and yet they may still have this interdimensional aspect.
Sure.
All right, so what made you decide to get into broadcasting and to present information and do, let's call it, research this way?
You know what? I'm not sure. It's funny because I got into YouTube listening, and my nephew knew what I was listening to. He thought I was obsessed. He wanted to start a podcast with me, but like a comedy, podcast. So the thought was there, and I was like, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do what I'm doing. You know, it was like, first it was like, I watched some of these things. I was like, well, I can do that. So I said, prove it. And I did. I set myself up for the challenge, and I made myself do it, and I stuck with it. And here we are. You know, and it's a fascination, you know, I'm fascinated with everybody's stories, you know, because that was the whole premise of why the fascination was. Here I am every night with all these people that I watch, you know, in chats, and I hang out with them, and we listen to all these other stories. But why? What brings these people here night after night? So I put the question out there. Why the fascination, guys? You know, tell me your stories. What is your story? You know, there's a reason you're in this genre, you know, and you'd be amazed at how many people have stories.
Yeah, that's one thing that I never realized visiting some of these shows, that I'd say that the majority of people that are in the chats are experiencers themselves.
Absolutely.
And just not something I put together until a little bit later on. I'm saying, oh, wow. But that also being said, maybe these people are already experiencers, and now they're being more vocal about it. So we're more aware of their existence in that way.
Well,
whereas before. Yep.
And I hate to say these people. These people are like family to me, you know.
We're all in the same circle here, yeah.
Yeah. I just lost my train of thought. What was the last thing you just said before I said about family?
I don't know.
I had a comment.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Somebody rewind and no.
I go on the stream of consciousness sometimes.
Yeah, dude. I was gonna answer the question you said, and
now I can't remember what the hell we were saying either. But all right, we'll come back to that. Let me ask you real quick here. I'm gonna put this up. Mikey Gematria. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. He says, Muggs, mention the asylum up in Jerome. I did a ghost hunt there, and it was off the chain.
Right on.
About that?
The asylum is a restaurant here. It's an old, I guess, what was it, an old hotel, or was that the old hospital? But they do haunted tours there. Supposedly it's haunted. Jerome is an old mining town that sits up on the face of the Black Hills. It's probably about 2,000 feet above where I'm at. It's an old mining town. It's pretty cool. It's a cross between like a hippie town and a biker town, but it's cool. It's a really cool town, and they've done it on, I think, Zach what's his name, Baggins or whatever. I think they did they did some time there and research there, and I don't know the stories behind it. You know, I haven't gotten up. I've never even been there. I was going to eat there one night, and I think they were closed because of the COVID. But I recently talked to a woman who actually works there, and she's about to start a YouTube channel. And I encouraged her, and I said, no, that's great, because she works there and she has access to, different areas that most people don't have access to. So she's going to take advantage of that and start putting stories out there. So that was interesting,
Do you think that we should be approaching the research of the paranormal the way that we are? I mean, I'm all for boots on the ground, don't get me wrong. But I think sometimes people go into certain locations that are purportedly haunted or have activity with one thing in mind, whatever it may be, what they expect to find or the outcome of this. Do you think that we're doing this in the best and most clear way, or is there possibly, again, this is just an opinion here, is there possibly another way that we could approach researching the paranormal that would be more perhaps respectful to both sides?
Well, some people research, they go into it for the purpose of debunking, and that's how they're trying to prove it, is by debunking. And if they can't debunk it, then it must, be something to it. And anybody that goes in hoping to see a ghost, they're kind of on the wrong track. They already have that anticipation. They want to see it. So I don't think they're being open-minded enough. Like, I think, I don't know. How do I explain this? I keep hearing like, oh, if you expect to see it, you're going to see it. Mm-hmm. Or something along those lines. I just think people need to just be totally open-minded and not go in with expectations, and just let whatever is going to happen organically, and, but pay attention. Don't force it. Don't sit there with I don't know. People use some weird things out there, ghost boxes and, K2 meters. And I don't know that all that's necessary,
Yep.
I think if you go in with an open mind and an open heart and good intention, you may, it may get you a little further, I think.
Well, it's interesting too, because I understand that not everybody can initially feel, fluctuations in energy around them. I would never expect, somebody to just be able to do something like that, but there are people who can. And it's also something you can become more sensitive about. If you talk to some of these ghost investigation teams and some of their members, some of them will tell you, they're like, well, I didn't believe anything when I walked in here. I was just curious. Now I have a whole host of experiences, and I've felt things that I never thought I would feel, and I still don't have explanations for it. So it's interesting that's an aspect. And I think in the end, the body is probably the best tool, but we're not really clear enough, I think, to put down all the equipment yet. But in respect to cryptids now, there are people who go out and do the boots on the ground research in respect to cryptids. Would you say that what you had just mentioned applies to cryptid investigation as well? Or do you think that there's something else in the way of approach with that?
No, I think the way, say, as far as, let's say, Bigfoot, people go out there and they say they're Bigfoot hunting. No, you're not. You're not going to find shit. You got to go out there and act normal. Go out, set up a campsite and just chill and do what humans do. And they'll come to you. If they're in the area, they'll find you. I don't think it's necessary to go looking for these things. Put yourself in an area where they might be, but do a normal thing and don't be an ass. Don't knock on trees and yell at them. I mean, it does work for people. People get responses, but you don't know what you're calling in. You don't know what that, you have no idea. It's all speculation on what it means. You could just be ringing a dinner bell.
In respect to
I think people should just go in and if they're serious about doing that and just don't bring weapons, don't go in there with bad intent. I believe they can sense the intent.
Oh yeah.
I also believe they can mind speak. I've had forms of telepathy with humans, so I know that's possible. So why wouldn't it? It would make sense that it would, a creature that sole purpose is to remain, unseen and, out of sight, they'd have a better way of communicating with each other besides, vocalizing.
And that also being at the forefront of attention, people really kind of look at animals as something below us. And yet possibly they've already had certain spiritual evolution in themselves, which stayed natural and pure because of perhaps their course and trajectory throughout physicality. But we see this a lot in nature, and we of course get the reports of cryptids having these abilities. We have extraterrestrials that are reportedly using telepathy to communicate with us. Do you think that might be our next step in our own evolution?
You know what? I think we had it once before, and I think we lost it. We lost the need for it. We look at, what do we need it for now? We have more communication skills and, as far as your phone and your computer and everything else, you don't, I think we did have it at one time, and, it's like a muscle, you don't use it, you lose it.
No, I could see that too. And I think a lot of ancient people had information and knowledge that we've lost throughout the years.
Yeah, they were more in tune to the natural world. We're just, we're not in tune.
Do you think well, I think some of us are getting there. And of course, those cultures that are indigenous and closer to nature as a whole, I think they have a little bit of an edge up on somebody who's more removed, living in the city. Sure. But it does have to do with the individual, I'm sure. But in terms of cryptids here, I've always thought, and you mentioned there was one Bigfoot at one point that we all thought was running around.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I did too. And, I looked at Loch Ness, the same. There's one over there. I didn't know about Champ or any of the other ones that may be out there.
Yeah.
Exactly. In your research or in your interviews or talking to people, have you ever heard of anyone witnessing, other than Long Island Bigfoot, because I know that he has a little bit to do with this, have you ever heard of anyone witnessing two different cryptids perhaps interacting with each other in a natural setting?
I haven't. I've heard stories of it. Nobody I've talked to, though. It's just, I've heard stories of dogmen and Bigfoot being in the same company. Aliens and Bigfoot being in the same company. It's probably about, I don't know if, it's probably about the only ones I've heard of. Because again, I don't get into too many other cryptids. I think I heard a story of I think it was a skinwalker tried to infiltrate a Bigfoot clan and got his ass kicked.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that sounds so familiar. Like they were like, what, are you kidding us? Supposedly. I don't know. How do you prove that story? It was just a story.
Sounds like a good video game, fighting video game. You got skinwalkers versus Yetis. I mean, I'm a gamer too, so that goes, of course, to that area.
I just saw a video that somebody put together, and it was Bigfoot versus Dogmen, and it was an animated one, but it was clever. But to see Bigfoot do a roundhouse, and and kick a dogman in the head, it was kind of amusing.
There's no question that Bigfoot has worked its way into our culture, the world over. And I think that that's unique in respect to some of these cryptids, because a lot of them will stay central or local to, that particular area that they're seen. And we might hear about it outside of that, but not really. We just know about it. But the people in this area, they'll know everything in terms of stories and sightings and what have you. It's really interesting too, when we talk about the duality of light and dark. A lot of us, I think we strive to be walking in the eternal light as long as we possibly can. And that's what we want to do. We want the fluffy stuff, the more preferable stuff. And yet we have this real connection and gravitational pull to certain negativity. And I'll give you an example, ghost hunters that want to go and find the most evil thing they can find. It's not just for documentation. I know that there's something there in the way of energy. What are your thoughts on why we might be so attracted to the darkness?
we have a morbid sense of fascination. It's like people can't go by a car accident without rubbernecking. There's I don't know. It depends on how dark it is. I mean, if they're attracted to dark power, I don't know. Some people are just drawn to that. But you can't, like you say, you can't have the light without the dark, and vice versa. And it's the yin and the yang, I guess. I don't know. That's as far as I can go with that. I don't know why people are drawn to it. No, I mean, I've never been drawn to that. It's just, I don't know why people would do that.
No, it's interesting because I think that there are people who aren't necessarily as drawn as others, and it's never necessarily a malicious thing. And I'm not talking about, criminals and people who do things that are obviously destructive to the whole. I'm just talking about people who have that, fascination. Even, I bring up black metal as a very interesting example of this sort of thing, because although that there are ideologies behind black metal, a lot of it was very rebellious against Christianity, especially, and a return to their old world religions and belief systems within their folklore in the countries that this was born in. There's still this real darkness about it. And, other than being rebellious, there are some people who actually take the whole satanic thing to its most extreme, and they'll do it through music, and they'll do it through action. I just find it very interesting that people are like that. And well, I mean, again, you talk about duality, or you talk about the right and the left. We are both, I think. It's whatever you want to express in this lifetime. However, you're always aware that you're both in one way, shape, or form.
Oh yeah, there's always a dark side. It's just it's choosing to not go there. It's morality and ethics, and but some people lack some of those things, and they don't see the wrong in some of those things.
What about your thoughts on dreams and sleep paralysis? Have you ever experienced this? And if you haven't, excuse me, let me rephrase this. And if you haven't, do you know anybody who has said that they have felt this?
I've never experienced it. One time I was in bed, and this was the only time I felt anything pertaining to sleep. It felt like I was laying on my left side, and it felt like somebody pushed my face right into the pillow and I had just woken up, and that's what it felt like. It felt like somebody pushed my face in the pillow. There was no one there because I was looking at I'm laying facing the edge of the bed. Mm-hmm. And that was the only time I ever felt anything like that, where I was like, what the hell was that? While I was in bed, sleeping. I don't think I've known anybody that's had sleep paralysis. I've heard a lot of, people talk about it, but see, I'm new to all this,
No, that's fine. That's fine. We just have a conversation here, and we go back and forth and what have you. That's totally cool. I had an experience many years ago in Long Island. I was staying with a girlfriend at the time in her house that she grew up in. And there was this painting on the wall in the bedroom that we would sleep. And I stayed there for, I think, 3 days the first time around. And by the second night, I realized I couldn't sleep because something was up with that painting. I was getting really hot. I was sweating, soaking the bed. My dreams were all over the place and just really nasty. And every time I looked at the painting, I got a really bad feeling. And it was a painting of a family. And I said, "What? Do you know the history behind that?" She said, "Oh yeah, that was actually painted by a prisoner of war in World War II at the behest of one of the generals or something. And it was her grandfather who ended up taking the painting. It was a picture of this man's family." I said, "Well, that's weird. I keep feeling something off this painting to the point where I feel like it's disrupting my sleep. Can we sleep in a different room?" And she was a little, okay, all right, well, I'll play along with this. And I didn't have a restless night the third night that I was there when we were in a different room. What are your thoughts on objects holding energy like this and affecting us in our waking states or in our dream states?
Well, I believe that, certain things can be haunted and retain a negative energy or positive energy or whatever. But I think, I've heard a lot of stories of, a piece of furniture or in that case, a painting. I don't know why something would haunt an object. I never figured that one out. I never understood that unless they were that so attached to that object during their life that, it just seems odd unless something was cursed. I have no idea why somebody would do that.
No, I mean, we see this a lot too. Robert the doll. Sorry, guys, my allergies are killing me here, so I have to keep coming off camera to blow my nose and not choke. Sorry, but that's what's happening there. I apologize. At any rate, yeah, we have Robert the doll. We have Annabelle the doll. Good Lord, let me get a drink here. Need more of that too. Anyway, we have all these objects that supposedly hold some sort of residual energy that's very nefarious. I don't know if spirit can actually enter into objects. I believe that it probably can. If everything's energy, you just enter into that arc field, or the field itself. Doesn't necessarily have to be arc if something's not alive. But that's really cool to look at, and at least I love studying it. Although you're not supposed to, I guess just by association, that something could happen. Which is brings up an interesting point. In watching some of these ghost episodes, people have reported having activity in their house, in their space, while watching the show or after the show. What are your thoughts on something like that affecting people, where we're just watching something to be entertained, and yet you have this other aspect of activity that comes behind?
I think to get an attachment or something like that through something like this is possible. I mean, I smudge. I do a cleansing before a show just in case it is possible. I don't know what I'm going to talk about from one night to the next. Could be Bigfoot, could be ghosts, could be demons, could be anything. So I kind of like armor up a little bit. I'll smudge and say a prayer. So there we go, losing train of thought again.
No worries. We're just talking about the way that some programming that deals with the esoterics and paranormal might affect us while we're watching it.
So, So, I think that it's possible. I mean, that there's could be some effect on someone who's vulnerable, to a negative energy, and like watching, if something goes on in your house, why would that happen? I've had psychic experiences through the computer, through the phone, through the air, just naturally 500 miles away. So I know things can happen through electronics and stuff. So why not? I know that, it could affect somebody who's watching this right now. If there was a negative energy, maybe somebody could get attached to that, or that could get attached to somebody else. I think it's possible somehow through electronics and stuff,
The thing that really kind of makes me nervous, I'll say, is that, it's one thing to get an attachment and then have to deal with that at whatever length. It's another to carry it over into another incarnation or another life that you're living. And believe me, this does happen. The reasons for which I'm not sure exactly. I think that it has to do with what we might call karma, which essentially is just a cause and effect sort of thing. Until the balance is reached, there's always the anomaly, or at least the awareness. But we get rid of these things by healing ourselves.
But most people aren't aware.
No, they're not aware. No, not at all. What do you think about the prospect of healing ourselves in this time? Do you think that there's more available to us in the way of those sort of tools that we can use to do this, such as Reiki or meditation or anything like that, yoga and so forth? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, the mind's an amazing tool. And my sister, Pammy, I don't know if she's here tonight. I didn't see her. She practices Reiki, and she swears by it. Like, people that she's worked on swear by it. And she had to learn how to cleanse herself, because you're dealing with negative energies. You're taking on that person's energies, or however it works. But she had to learn to cleanse herself, because that negative energy was on her now. And I think the human body and the mind you can heal yourself. I don't know how, but I believe it's possible. We are an amazing machine. We can cut ourselves and heal ourselves. So why can't we, internally heal ourselves or something,
Well, it's definitely been proposed, and I'm actually talking to somebody at length about this theory, wherein the body does actually have regenerative properties, but much more further in implication than perhaps the medical field is even aware of. I remember watching something some years ago, and I saw an article online about it too. And I can't remember if this is exactly what happened, but it was something along these lines. The guy lost his thumb, or like the tip of his thumb, bone and all, and the damn thing started growing back, and it grew back into a full finger. Now, how does that work? You know what I mean? I wonder if there's something in our DNA that some of us might have alighted in the way of codons, or something, again, in that realm. What do you think in terms of the regenerative properties? Are there latent healing capabilities that we have that we're just not expressing right now?
That's, for something like that to happen, for a regrowth, that's odd. I mean, I've never heard of that, except on a lizard loses its tail and it grows back, but as far as appendages, or phalanges, or whatever you want to call them, that's weird. I've never heard of something like that.
I mean, it was the first time I had seen it too. The thing that I'm learning more and more is that as we go forward, everything is possible. If you can imagine it, it's probably happened, or it's going to happen. I mean, that doesn't necessarily, it sounds limiting, the statement, but it's actually not, because of how many vast possibilities are out there.
It's endless.
It's endless. It really is. And at least in the way that our linear interpretation and perceptions would see this, it's absolutely endless. Which actually brings me to a question here. What do you think about the universe? Do you think that it is endless itself? Do you think it closes back on loops upon itself? Or do you think that there are some sort of energetic boundaries beyond, what we can see personally and at the end of the universe? What do you think?
I've never given it that much thought. I've never put I recently heard something that somebody said, yeah, you get to the end and there's a wall. I was like, okay. But no idea, I don't know. Infinity is pretty far,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
All right. Well, let me bring it in a little closer. How about the celestial bodies just outside our Earth here, Mars, the Moon, and some of these other ones that we've seen these odd structures that we're calling pareidolia or apophenia, and yet there are some very striking similarities in the way of defining characteristics in some of these structures, such as the face on Mars, if you're familiar. What are your thoughts on some of these structures that are on these closer celestial bodies? Do you think that we actually were there at one point, or there was a species there that didn't have anything necessarily to do with the Earth, but it existed on the planet? Or do you think that there might have been some sort of networking between the planets at that time, where we'll see something similar to Göbekli Tepe on Mars, or Chichen Itza on Mars, something like that? What do you think?
Oh, that's a tough question.
Have fun with it.
That's no. It's basically saying, do you believe that these other planets were inhabited at one point? If at times I used to think, and it's not really answering this question, but well, no, it's weird.
No,
like I always thought that possibly, Martians were actually humans from the future.
Okay,
you know what I'm saying? Aliens
yes.
were, and something happened, or whatever. But for millions of years in the future, I always had that in my head for some reason, that was a possibility. And I also think that there's a theory that I have in my head that there were amazing civilizations before us that like would blow us away. That and just they were so long ago that there's no evidence of their existence. But it's just weird that there are some strange things that they find that like you mentioned, these different sites and like Machu Picchu, and doing all those, the construction of those is at the time, to me, beyond human capability without help. I mean, we are an amazing species, but there are limitations.
I like the way you put that. I mean, if you look into Richard Hoagland's work, he was very thorough on covering different anomalies on the moon and other aspects of space. But I really focused on his work with the moon. And one of the things that he mentioned was there are these glass tubes that are broken, and some of them are still whole. They're all floating about, what did he say, 3 to 5 miles above the lunar surface. And again, this is what he was reporting in his book. I think it was called Dark Mission. I have to double check that. He said that the astronauts, when they went there, they observed a prismatic environment wherein all the sun's rays were coming through these little bits of glass that are shoved into the atmosphere and shining through. And he was talking about this being some of the inspiration for Buzz Aldrin's art and his paintings that he did, which had sort of a psychedelic feel to him at first glance. So I think that's very interesting, that there might be much more there in the way of artifacts that are left over from whatever civilization is there. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the civilization lived on the planet. Like you're saying, they could be visiting from another time. There's, once you get into the aspect of time travel and you're ripping through different voids and so forth, and you're playing around with the time space stuff, you really kind of narrow down, how do I want to say this? You kind of narrow down. All right, I'll put it this way. You make the possibilities that much wider, although the implication is that it's more pinpoint.
Sure.
Yeah. So could there be an advanced civilization that is actually us from the future, sitting in right beside us here right now, in a different fold of a dimensional vibration that I can't see? Absolutely. And I don't see why it wouldn't necessarily exist like that, considering that vibrations seem to be stacked and intermingle. But like oil and water, some of these don't necessarily mix. There is a defining line between the two, threshold, if you will, going through these. And I just think it's interesting to look at stuff like that. What do you think about, let's talk about astral projection a little bit, because you brought this in. And you said you had an interesting experience that was somewhat of an NED. No, NDE.
Well, it was more of an OBE, but outer body
OBE.
experience.
Okay, out of body experience, and which is very similar to
semantics.
But it does clarify some things here. But it's similar to astral projection as we know it. And personally, it's much easier for me to do it in a dream or in my sleeping state. It just seems to be that much easier to kind of slip out into the unconscious and then, go about it that way, rather sitting down and intentionally saying, I'm going to leave my body right now, which you can do too. But I find it more difficult. What are your thoughts on astral projection in the dream state versus a lucid dream? We'll start there.
I've never astral projected. I've heard stories of it. It's kind of personal. It's kind of weird. When I quit drinking, it's because I had to. I hit the wall. I couldn't go anymore. Couldn't drink anymore, and I detoxed myself. And it was a week of hell, and I didn't sleep for a week. And this was weird. I'd lay in bed, my eyes closed, and I'd be in Sedona. I'd open my eyes. I'm in my room, but as soon as I closed my eyes, I was back in Sedona. It wasn't like I had to fall asleep and get back into a dream. No, it was as soon as I closed my eyes, I was there. I don't know what that was. You know, it happened like 2 nights in a row where it was like a dream, but it happened I was aware of the dream while it was happening, you know, while I was there.
Yep.
You know, little lucid, you know, but I don't know. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't a dream, you know. And I think in the state that I was in, you know, I was a wreck. My mind, I think, you know, I don't know what to call it. I don't know. It was so weird to be able to close your eyes and be exactly where you left off or go back to the same spot without falling asleep.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't make sense to me. You know, open my eyes, I'm in my room. Close my eyes, I'm not.
I've experienced that actually recently too, where I was kind of waking up from a night's sleep and drifting in and out of that conscious state and unconscious state. And I remember closing my eyes and I was back in the house that I grew up in. And when I opened my eyes, I was actually surprised for a moment that I was somewhere completely different. And I said to myself, oh my God, where did the time go? Because this was over 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. I'm like, what the hell happened to the time? And it just gave me this real moment of sobriety in respect to, you know, where we were and so forth. But yeah, it's weird. You can close your eyes. You're actually there in that space. It feels like. Another thing that I've experienced too, which I still haven't found anyone else who's had something similar, is that there were times that I would be, again, in that same waking up state or just falling asleep. Most of the time I was waking up. And I'd close my eyes and all of a sudden, I'm going to call it my mind's eye. I would see a negative of the entire room. And I could literally move about the room in any way I wanted to, but it was in a negative. And almost sort of scintillating in a sense. You know, it had some brightness about it. But again, it was grayscale negative. It was very strange. And as soon as... Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
I was going to say, as soon as I realized that I'm looking out there and this is what I'm seeing, and every little bit of detail, the rug, the walls, the ceiling, everything, boom, I'm right back in my body again. I'll say that because it completely vanishes and I can wake up. And sure enough, I mean, I'm in that room that I was just looking at. It's always the room that I'm in. Have you ever had anything that was similar to that? I'm asking everybody this one.
Yeah. No, I haven't.
Okay, no, that's cool. I'm just curious because a lot of odd things happen when we're sleeping, and the way that we interpret these things, I think is paramount to understanding what it is that we're actually going through, and what that side of life actually is about. Because, you know, let's face it, we probably like to spend more time sleeping, but we spend quite a bit of our existence sleeping. So there has to be something more there, I think, than just a quick recharge. I think we must be doing work on other levels when we go into that sleep state. And it's my understanding too, that at certain points in history, or let's just call it that, certain points in history, there have been folks who have sort of overcome the need to sleep. We can see some of this in the monks of today, even, where they're just very disciplined. And what actually happens, again, this is my understanding, is that they become so connected with prana, okay, through the 2 poles on the body, the 2 main poles. They're pulling in prana, and it's meeting at the dantian, which is just below the belly button. Okay, if you guys study Tai Chi or anything like that, you'll know what that is. It's an energetic center. And since this prana is always flowing, and you can find this in sacred geometry too, in terms of the Merkaba meditation and so forth, this energy is just keeping them. They don't have to eat. They don't have to sleep. They don't need any of those regenerative or recharging activities that we normally do. So if that's the case, that we can get to a point like that, it makes me wonder what the hell happened that we fell so deep into unconsciousness that we forgot, you know, this tool, and we then started having to eat to get energy instead of getting prana right from the source. I mean, think of it this way. If we didn't have to eat, okay, to survive, and we were just hooked into this energy this way, I mean, what would our planet look like? I mean, we'd have animals running all over, I'm sure. But what would our planet actually look like? You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
Look at they call them sun gazers. This is probably the closest to a mainstream interpretation of what I'm mentioning. These people swear that they'll go and stand at sunrise and sunset, and they'll gaze at the sky and the sun, not directly, but they're gazing off, right? And what they're doing is they're pulling in all the energy. It's specific. I think it's a specific spectrum of light they're pulling energy in from, and that's actually nurturing them. And they talk about only sleeping a few hours a night. They eat very little, and they're as healthy as you can possibly imagine. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the sun gazers, check them out, because that's really interesting to me. I don't know how the hell people are doing it.
Yeah, I don't know either, because I mean, we're kind of this biomechanical thing we got here. We got to feed it, and how I don't see how just energy from something else would nourish it. I don't know about those energies though, so
Mm-hmm. No, it's cool. I mean, it's interesting to look into. I think if anything, this would be I'll call it the next step on the tier of evolution here, wherein we would return to that state where we remember we were more connected. Because chances are, if people were more connected in ancient times, there were definitely folks who understood this kind of art and, this way of existence in respect to that. But again, it makes sense to me that if somebody was hooked directly into prana, which is the universal energy that, God, it comes back to like sexual energy and the creative energy, that this is something that could be sustained, but again, it's a physical impossibility based on what we know. So it's like, it's something to entertain.
I've never heard of that prana. I've never heard it.
Well, it's the first time for everything, and I'm glad you're doing it right here on Dark Hour Paranormal.
I'm always up for learning.
Oh, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
So, Mogollon, we're running a little short on time here, and I want to give you a moment to tell everybody where they can find you. Of course, go to the Mogollon Monsters channel, Why the Fascination on YouTube. But if there's anywhere else, or you want to explain that a little bit more, please tell us what you do.
Yeah, as you know, Why the Fascination. That's really the only place that I broadcast. I don't do any other platforms. I do have a Facebook page. But ever since they made me take my name down, like they made me take Mogollon Monster down.
Huh.
I kind of was like, well, that's no fun, so I don't pay that much attention to the Facebook page. But yeah, most of my stuff is YouTube twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I'm always in somebody's chat. I moderate on different shows, so people know where to find me.
Fantastic. No, that's awesome.
Check out Mogollon Monster Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, Why the Fascination, or WTF live. I hope to see you guys there.
Absolutely. And I definitely encourage you guys to go and check him out. Let me ask you before we go here, what is the most impactful interview you've had on your show, and how did it affect you in the long run?
I don't know that there were any interviews that specifically were impactful, but it was the after effect, the aftermath, where after somebody told their story and got it off their chest, where they decided they're going to go back into the woods. They're going to, not let their experience define them. So they got back on the horse, and and they accredit it to me just for giving them a platform to be able to express themselves and tell their stories, and do it without ridicule. And so I wouldn't say it was any specific interview, but the results of some of the interviews, the aftermath of actually helping someone and not realizing it at the time. It was a
more rewarding,
pleasant side effect.
No, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for being here with us tonight on Dark Hour Paranormal, Mogollon Monster. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned a few things. So this has been awesome, man. We'll definitely have to do it again.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my door is always open to you. You know
Oh,
that.
thank you very much. I appreciate it. What I'll do is I'll take you off for just a moment, and then I'll close out the show, and I'll come say my proper goodbyes off camera.
Very good.
Thank you very much, man.
My pleasure. Take care. Everybody in chat, thank you very much.
Excellent. Another fantastic show. I like these host-to-host sort of settings because we'll sit and we'll talk. We'll have a conversation. It's not as rigid in the way of structure and questions and so forth. So this is really cool. And I'm really happy that Mogollon Monster could be here with me tonight. As I mentioned, I was on his show last Tuesday, and it was a fantastic time. I enjoyed it just as much as I enjoyed having him as a guest here with us. Thank you guys for coming, and some of the questions, I think I saw a couple and I meant to get back to them, but stream of thought, I'm sorry if I've missed yours. I appreciate you guys being here. Stay tuned. We do have a couple things coming up next week. I have Debbie Solaris coming in on Friday, and she's going to be talking about healing. I'm going to really focus on the healing aspects of what she does in her work, and you guys will really find that interesting, I believe. If you guys want to donate to Dark Hour Paranormal, you may. There is a PayPal in the chat, in the description below. You can click that link and you can donate. But I want to say thank you to each and every one of you, because I started doing this show as Dark Hour Paranormal, I believe it was May 13th of 2020. Okay. And today we have now hit 1,000 subscribers. I'm not huge on numbers, but I do understand what they represent. And it's cool to know that that many people are interested in what we're doing. So thank you. Very special thank you to you and all of those who have supported Dark Hour Paranormal since the beginning. And I want to thank my moderators for the great job that you guys do. And of course, everyone who visits, please like and subscribe. It does really help the channel. And that being said, Super Chat will be open hopefully by the next show, but we'll see what happens. We're already there because I know some of you have been asking quite often. So I wanted to address that with you very quickly. All right, guys, that being said, we're going to get on out of here. I think that I am on Spaced Out Radio tonight with ThirdPhaseOfMoon and their team. So definitely check that out this evening. We'll be on, I believe it's 12 o'clock Eastern. And yeah, wherever it is in your location, use that as a reference. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time here on Dark Hour Paranormal. I'm sure I forgot something here, but I'll remember after the show and it doesn't matter. Good night, everybody. Also, thank you, Grimwitch, for the awesome intro and outro. Have a good night, guys.